It was trying to gain that identity that, hey, you are still worth pursuing. You are still worth being a mom to your kids. You are still have value with what you have to say to others, even within the depth of that grief.
You're listening to Life After Losing Mom with me, Kat Bonner. On this podcast, you'll hear from other women who have lost their mom and discovered the exact coping strategies you need to get through the day and be in the best place you've ever been. Don't miss another episode of Life After Losing Mom. Subscribe today. More information can be found at katbonner.com/podcast. And if you'd like to join a group of like-minded women, head to Facebook and search for the Life After Losing Mom community. Hello, Tashina. How are you?
Doing well.
Good, thank you. Well, I know briefly a little bit about what you do, but we will get to that at the end of the show. So I just wanted to thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk a little bit about my journey with, having to deal with the loss of my mother at an age, I was 30 when she passed, and I have 3 kids, and my youngest was 8 weeks old when she passed, and how to come to terms that, hey, she won't be there for my kids. She won't be grandma anymore. She'll just be a distant memory, as well as how to navigate grief for myself and my girls. That was a big challenge. And so I just, 3 years fast forward, it will be 3 years, June 24th. So I'm coming up on that anniversary in a couple weeks. And it's been a long road. It's been a lot of tears, but also a lot of joy, and having to navigate through grief counseling and what I do with FIT4MOM Lanier and being able to pour into other moms. I'll talk about that later, but it's been an okay road, and I'm surviving. I take it one day at a time, and we just see how it goes.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. I love how you were saying take it one day at a time, because that's so important in grief and, well, just life in general, but especially with grief. And wow, yeah, 8 weeks when your youngest one was 8 weeks. So
yeah, it was a little emotional. Let's just say that.
Yeah. So you have 3 girls too?
I do. I have 3 girls.
Oh, wow. So it's like a double whammy. It's like, okay, like you're a girl who like lost her mom,
exactly.
And I mean, I hate to think that that's different than like men, but 3 girls, it's like you have that relationship with them that you had with your mom.
Exactly.
So you're like, oh, crud.
Not having it. It's challenging because, too, you see on, Facebook our biggest demise, but we see, other girls with their moms and, grandma time and talking about generations. And you're like, oh, this is tough because my kids won't have that. My oldest was 4 when my mom passed, and my middle was 2. And my oldest, of course, she had a really good relationship with my mom. And so she remembers her, and my middle does a bit as well. She kind of has a really good memory, surprisingly enough. So she's got some great memories of grandma. My youngest, though, she has no idea. And one thing that was cool about my mom was an identical twin. And so my aunt lives very close by to us, and she looks exactly like grandma. And so my girls have been blessed with having a, backup grandma, to say the least. But my youngest, she's like, she doesn't understand. We're like, I'll have pictures of my mom and my aunt, and she's just like, well, that's Aunt Di. And you're like, well, no, that's grandma and Aunt Di. She's just like, no, it's not. And so trying to explain to her and keep my mom's memory alive. I know she's only 3 and she'll understand it eventually, but trying to talk about grandma with her, she's just like, no, mom, this isn't grandma. This is Aunt Di. But my older girls are like, no, Evelyn, this is grandma. And so we have a lot of those conversations in our house, which, brings a lot of laughter with it, because it is just like kind of a silly situation to have, but a very unique situation as well.
I love that. I'm sure, as your younger one gets older, she'll understand more, but like having them close by, I can't imagine. I mean, I get confused anyways when there's two of them standing side by side.
Exactly.
So, oh my gosh, I wonder if they're anything alike.
Yeah, they're my mom and my aunt. They're very much alike.
Oh, well, I was going to say, how do you feel about that? Is that weird?
It's kind of a mixed bag of emotion, just like kind of how grief is. Like, my mom died of breast cancer. And so I always tell people about it. They're like, well, don't you wish she was here? And you're like, well, of course, but I would need her here pre-breast cancer. Like, I do not want her back the way that she was, just because cancer is awful
Cancer
thing. And it's the same with my aunt. Like, I am so thankful that I have her, because I get a glimpse of my mom with her. And as well as too, like, I can still at least ask her questions like, do you remember this when I was little? Because those memories start to fade. Like, what happened when I was a child, especially with my girls asking this, well, mommy, did you do that as a kid? And you're like, maybe I did. I don't know. And so I do have that with my aunt to be able to talk about it. But then I also have a person that's walking around that looks exactly like my mom, and she's not. And that also makes it difficult as well, because it's a reminder that you don't have your mom. And so it's, the same way that grief is, where it's just that mixed bag of, I'm very thankful for it, but it's also tough at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know how I would feel if somebody was walking around that looked like my mom. That was not my mom. I feel like you would probably never get used to that.
It's definitely weird. I'll have to send you a picture, because they do look a lot alike. Like a lot of pictures of from when they were little girls, my mom and my aunt, like, we can't even tell. We're like, I don't even know who's who, because they look so much alike. So it is definitely, it's different.
I mean, that's funny. I guess like identical twins are identical, but you don't really think about those things until you're in the situation. You're like, oh my goodness, what in the world?
I know. I remember I'm on a motherless daughter site on Facebook, which is super helpful, because I always encourage people when I talk to other people that have gone through loss with their mom, and I'm like, you need to get on something, because it's like that strange comfort that you get from hearing other people with the same loss. Like, it's just, I don't know if it's like a misery loves company or what, but you just get a lot of comfort from the fact that other people have lost their moms too, and seeing that, hey, they're actually making it, and they're surviving, so I can too. And I remember the one day I just posted and I was like, has anybody, have their mom as a twin? And in these sites, I mean, they have thousands of people in it. And no, everybody was just like, no, I don't have that problem. I'm like, okay, I guess I'm kind of, which I know I'm not alone, but like from the site, I was like, oh, okay.
Like, oh, well, this is awkward.
And you're like, want, no.
That's funny. Yeah. I mean, it's always nice to have somebody who understands your loss, I wouldn't say somebody who understands. I would say people have been through the same loss, because those are two different things. So if that is found on Facebook, if that is found through Meetup, if that is found in Target, whatever, it's found, it's there, it doesn't matter. Regardless, it's very much so needed. It seems like your mom passed like right when like she was a grandma. I mean, obviously she had been a grandma for 4 years, but like if you don't plan on having any more kids, it's like right after, like your last kid was born,
Exactly.
So, and obviously like we always need our moms, but I feel like you really needed her when your last kid was born, it's like, really, really, does it have to be now?
Yes, exactly. It was challenging. Not only, too, I had just had a baby, so my hormones were going crazy, which didn't help. But yeah, you're just like, wait, like my mom was just very intentional with her time, and family was just always so important. So like with my older two girls, she took several weeks off. She almost took like a maternity leave and would come and stay with us and just help us with like, just everything. With your mom, it's like you don't even have to ask. They just do, they clean the house, they do, just it all comes second nature. And with my youngest, with Evelyn, it was tough because you're just like, here, I have this 8-week old. Here, we're planning a funeral. I'm navigating grief and like the loss of mom, and the whole family's just broken, and it was tough because you're just like, how do you keep going on? Because you have to, because you have especially an 8-week old who like depends entirely on mommy, but also just grieve. And it was tough. It was a lot of dark times. Let's just say that that occurred, because it just, you're like, whoa, this is tough. Like, how do you keep going with these things? And so that's kind of when I went ahead and started FIT4MOM Lanier. We were originally from Phoenix, Arizona. That's where I had my first two girls, and we moved to Georgia to be with my mom, where my parents live. And I was planning on starting FIT4MOM. It's a franchise. I actually had my contract to sign my franchise the day that my mom passed. And so, of course, I didn't sign that day because that was not going to happen. But I went ahead and 4 weeks later signed that contract and opened up shop. And I think a lot of people might look at me as like, wow, that is crazy. Why would you start a business, 4 weeks of, having your mom pass? But it gave me so much purpose and something to do and pour into, and just like a direction to go. And so I did it. As crazy as it was, and went head first into it.
Yeah, that's so important. I mean, there's no, time frame for anything. It really just depends. But I mean, you have to have, like, especially when you're grieving, you have to have something to motivate you and that keeps you going, and like a reason behind dealing with all of this. I mean, like you said, like you literally have to have a purpose, and whatever that is for you is whatever that is. So it's so funny that I was about to ask, did you start FIT4MOM, after your mom passed? But I mean, it's so funny to look at, how the timing works out. I feel like a lot of women in our situation probably struggle with finding purpose. And when you, at least for me, like when you don't find purpose, you really start to like lose sight of certain things, like lose sight of who you are. It's like, why am I doing this? Like, am I like, I don't know this person. Like, I'm just crying all the time, or, that sort of thing. And grief can, I think because grief is so like, individualized, that it's easy to lose sight of who you are as an individual without that purpose.
Yes,
So
no doubt.
do you think that FIT4MOM helped you, rediscover your identity through grieving? Or, what helped you, figure out who this new person was?
Yeah, I think it definitely played a huge role. So, I mean, I'll explain. FIT4MOM Lanier, basically what it is we are a workout program for moms. We work out with our kiddos, and we have some classes where we don't, but it is solely moms that work out together. And, I just kind of came to a turning point. I did it in Arizona, where we're from. I was an instructor, and I did it from when my oldest, who's 7 now, she was 9 weeks old, is when I found it. And it gave me so much purpose as a mom, pre moving out here and pre owning one as a franchise. And, because, as moms, just being a mom, you have all the questions with these brand new babies, and you're just like, you always feel like you're failing at everything. And it's just tough. It's just tough being a mom. And so it was a true blessing to me in navigating how to be a mom. When my mom lived in Georgia and I was across the country, to have those ladies to lean on. And so when I decided to start it out here, I knew that the sole reason that I started it was for other moms to be around me and pour into me. And through it, I pour into moms like crazy. I mean, that's also why I started it. But at the time, I needed some moms to rally around me and be like, "Hey, you're doing okay. You can do this. You got this." And that was huge, just with pulling me out of the depths of grief and allowing me to just start the healing process. And I also, a big purpose through it was I had a great mom. My mom was awesome. She was unbelievably wise. We always cracked up because she never knew a stranger. Like, people would she'd just sit down and talk to him, and people would share their life story with her. And she just had this cool knack with her that just really ministered to people. And I have a bit of that too, and I had to kind of put on my big girl panties and be like, you know what? What's a great way to honor my mom? It's by doing what she did in a lot of ways and pour into other people. And so I was able to really just say, you know what? I had a great mom. I was taught to be a really good mom. And now I'm going to go help other mothers do the same. And it gives you that sense of identity and that purpose of you know what? Hey, we're all going to be okay. Now, that doesn't mean I'm perfect by any means. You can ask a lot of my clients, that we have good days and we have bad days, but the one true thing that we fall back on is that we are here to embetter one another's lives and to lift one another up and carry them through. Because when you go into even just mothers, a group of mothers, all of them carry some sort of grief. A lot of it's from losing their own children through miscarriage or various things. A good bit of them even have lost parents. And how I've going through what I did with my mom has been able to just really open up the floodgates with other moms and just being like, yes, I get your grief. I get the depth of that sorrow. And you know what? We can just keep moving forward. But it's still there. That hole will always still be there. But that doesn't mean that you have to shut down and stop life. That means that you get to take that hole and you can protect it as much as you need, but you're going to keep that growth all around that hole, just building up and building up so that you still will be able to flourish. And that's where FIT4MOMs become that purpose for me, to be able to do that for other moms as well as myself, and kind of, that practice what you preach. So if I'm telling this to other moms, well, I better be doing it too and believing in my own stuff. And so that's where I did find my identity with it.
Yeah, I love that. It almost seems like, you were trying to not necessarily find your purpose, but okay, sorry, that sounds really bad, but it almost seems like that was a way that you found your community, even if there weren't a whole ton of moms in there who had lost a mom, nonetheless, you still were around women who could just relate, because that's the way that those women were, and that's the way that their mindset was. So do you think that you were struggling to find your identity as a person, or, struggling to find your identity as a mom?
I think probably more as a person. I was very blessed in the fact that my mom was one of the first losses I've had to deal with, and um, which is amazing, but also very tough because it was a tough loss to have to deal with when it was one of your first ones, and I, it was trying to gain that identity that, hey, you are still worth pursuing. You are still worth being a mom to your kids. You are still have value with what you have to say to others, even within the depth of that grief. And I went through a good bit of counseling as well, and that's been a huge help in just getting me the strength to be bold and talk about my grief and talk about how, you know what, losing your mom does suck. Like, for lack of a better way to put it, it just straight sucks. And you know what, that's okay to acknowledge that it does. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to let it navigate everything that I do in a negative way. I'm going to let it navigate everything I do in a positive way, because my grief, yes, it will always be a part of me. I will never lose it, because you hear people that, celebrating 60 some odd years without their mom, and it still stings. It's now become a new part of me, but I'm not going to let the negativity of my grief define who I am. And I'm going to allow it to be a blessing to others by talking about it. And if I can just get even one person that helps with going through grief themselves, I think it's a success. And I'm going to use it to empower. I'm not going to use it to tear me down.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously it seems like, I mean, how, can you not struggle with your identity, when you lose the person who like birthed you? I know that sounds, a little, I guess, vulgar, or I don't even know what the correct verbiage is here, but like gory. But regardless of, like, if a woman is close to her mom or not, I mean, that's just a special bond that a mother and her daughter have, or like a mother and her child even. So what was it that you think, obviously I know that Fit4Mom helped you rediscover your identity, but was there something like specifically about it? It seems to me, the way, I'm interpreting it, is that when your mom died, you like had just become a mom again. So maybe that's why, like, that's where the identity was being tied in, like working with other moms. Yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would say most definitely. I was starting over again with a baby, and I raised two girls with mom, but now I have a new baby to raise without, and going through a lot of firsts without her. And um, because you naturally, when something new happens, you pick up that phone and you're like, "Hey, mom, guess what? They did this or what." Well, I didn't have that anymore, and so having to kind of internalize and find that identity that, hey, you are strong in yourself. You don't have to call mom for it. You can celebrate those things within you and with your family, my husband and my kiddos. And trying to find that identity that I am a strong mom without my mom being here, and that I can do things without mom being here. And it was really just finding that, hey, you are strong and you can do this. And that was a huge part of kind of that inner dialogue that I had to have with myself constantly, and still do a good bit, is that, hey, you can do this. You got this, basically. And just kind of letting yourself be like, it's okay that I don't have mom to call anymore. It's okay that I don't have advice from her anymore. Because you know what? She has given me everything that I needed, all the tools that I needed. And now I just need to lean on them and take them and move forward and make them my tools that now define me, who I am, and go forward. And that's a great way to honor my mom as well, is be like, you taught me these, and now I'm going to move forward and I'm going to stand on them. And it's helped me go through a lot of it. It's just putting on those big girl britches, basically.
Yeah, I mean, you're very right. And it's so weird to think, like, sometimes it's immediate when you realize that you are struggling with your identity and you don't know who you are anymore. But then in other aspects, it's like, wait, it takes you a while to like realize that this is what you're struggling with. So for you, was it like immediate or more gradual that, you realized you were really struggling with your identity?
I'd say it was fairly immediate. It was, because you are just, it just hits you. You're just like, oh my gosh, how can I do this? How am I able to go on and do the day to day like I used to? I don't know if I can, and really grappling with that. And it was hard to navigate how to do that, how to move forward and say, all right, you can do this. You will survive, basically. And mainly getting right into grief counseling, that was huge. And just kind of allowing myself to talk about mom and the tragedy as well as the good with it. And that kind of started, just washing over you and just kind of bringing up the good reminders, and honestly crying a lot, especially at first, crying all the time. And it's just, I think, just allowing yourself to grieve and be, and then saying, okay, this is what it is now. I can't bring mom back. It's not going to happen. And so I can be okay, and I can move forward, and I can be the mom that she wanted me to be, and I can be the wife that she wanted me to be, and that she looked in on and taught, and I can be that person, and allowing myself to be the person that my mom taught me to be, by just kind of unwinding just the grief and unwinding the hurt. And that was a huge part of just saying, okay, I got this. This is what I'm going to be. I'm going to be this mom that my mom taught me to be. And I can do that.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that, and like realizing that, it almost was immediate, and that is almost hard to explain. Like, in general, it's hard to put, your feelings into words sometimes, especially when it comes to grief, because geez, grief is grief. But did you struggle with, finding your identity in the past? Like, how did you, I mean, I know Fit4MOM was like how you coped with that, but did you have to try like a bunch of things. Like, how did you cope with this struggle of grief to, you know, move on from it? Is there a specific thing that helped you?
I would say, I mean, grief counseling was huge. I found an amazing counselor. And I actually tried a couple, and finally found one that was like, oh, this is my person, And I always encourage people, if they're going through any kind of substantial loss, like if they're not meshing with a counselor, change, and you will find that one. But really, I think just unraveling what grief is was a big turning point for me. Because you know what, when you haven't dealt with grief, you kind of just say, all right, I'll check off, this box, and I'll check off this box, like denial and all these things. And I'll just start checking them off. And once I get over them, then I'm over them. And then all of a sudden you lose somebody and you're like, oh, wait, wait, I could, Tuesday may have been my day of denial, but Wednesday was my angry day and Thursday was my cry, and like you're hitting them all, or it could have been just like by the hour, who knows? And I think just really grappling the understanding of what grief was, and that grief is, it won't end. It's not going to stop. I'm never going to stop grieving my mother. It's not going to stop. And I think just kind of coming to that terms that there's no bookends on grief. It will always happen. You will have good days and you will have bad days. And as time progresses, you have more good days than bad days. And allowing yourself to have good days, that telling yourself that it's okay to have joyful times amidst your grief. You can still have a lot of joy. And that my mom wanted me to be like that too. She doesn't want me to sit around and be crying about her all the time. She wants me to go be a mom to my kids and go change the world with with doing FIT4MOM and changing one mom at a time. And that's what she wanted me to do. And so being able to allow myself to honor her, and what she would really want me to do, and kind of keep that in the back of my mind when I do have those sad days, that, hey, my mom, she was good. She was one to cry. She would show her emotions and be like, okay, we get it out and then we move forward. And I feel like I do a lot of the same that she, did, and just realizing how much I am like my mom and where she taught me these things. And so I'm going to do it that way then. I'm going to have my sad days and I'm going to allow myself to cry. And my girls know, they'll see me crying. Well, are you thinking about grandma? Yeah, baby, I am thinking about grandma, and they know, and sharing in that grief with them, because they're having to grieve too, because they lost their grandma and that was tough. And just that kind of saying, I'm going to carry this grief with me, but I'm not going to let it hinder who I'm supposed to be and the mom that I'm supposed to be to my kids, and the fitness instructor to the moms that I teach, or the leader to the moms that I teach. And I'm not going to let it be a negative. I'm going to let it be a positive. Because of my grief, I'm able to lead in this way. Because of my grief, I'm able to be a better mom and be purposeful in what I do with my girls. Because of my grief, I'm able to put one step in front of the other and use it as a positive and not a negative.
I think that is like my new favorite phrase, because of my grief, but it is so true.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like, and I'm sure a ton of people struggle with this. I know that I did as well, but it's almost like just expressing your grief, whether it's talking it out or writing it out or whatever. Like, you have to express your grief somehow figure out what it is that is going to help you rediscover your identity.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, when you figured out that it was going to be, doing the whole FIT4MOM thing and working with moms, that was going to help you rediscover your identity.
Yeah.
then you did that. But you had to like talk it through, and you had to get help before you knew, it seems like, that that's what it was that would help you find yourself again. And that's so important. Like, grief is not an easy thing to talk about, regardless of who you're talking about it with. But it literally just goes to show that, like, how important it is. I mean, nobody wants to feel like they don't know who they are. I mean, it's bad enough that you're in this situation. And like, and you're obviously not going to be the same person that you were before this happened.
No.
I think that's also very important to point out. But once you A, realize that, and B, realize that like, you're so much stronger of a person, and that take pride in the fact that you are who you are because of your grief, that is a very powerful thing. And that is something that people you should be proud of, because not many people get to say that. And yeah, it sucks. Yeah. Like, you wish you might wish that you didn't have to go through this to be this kick-ass woman that you are, but that's life, and you have to make the best out of the hand that, you have been dealt. And no, you cannot let grief control you. You have to take control of it to get to where you want to be, and to find the person that you are meant to be in this world.
Yeah, exactly. And you do. And I always, tell my clients, or even as close friends, I'm like, I'm going to blow grief up, because so many people they don't talk about it. Like, okay, maybe if I don't mention her mom, then, everything will be okay. And I'm like, no, you guys talk about it. Like, and if I start crying, it's okay. Like, I will cry in front of you, because you know what? I'd rather talk about it. And that is more honoring to my mom than shoving it down and not talking about it. And I want my clients and my friends to ask me about it, because you know what? They're so fortunate that they have their mom, but maybe one day they won't. And I want them to know that, hey, they can come to me, because I have gone through it and I am fairly vocal about it. And not that I do it the right way by any means, but I'm going to talk about it because it is now a part of me. And like we say, our identity, like grief is now an identity of mine, a new hat that I wear. And I'm going to talk about that hat because it's a big part of me.
It's okay.
My girls.
It's okay.
Here, hold on one second.
It's okay.
Hey, Emma, close the door. We had a big conversation. I said, you guys have to be quiet.
It's okay. And yeah, I don't know. I think it's very important. Like, I love how you said, maybe my clients will go through this loss one day. First of all, I'm not saying that children don't pass before their parents, but regardless, like, they will be without their moms, whether they are in heaven or whatever you believe in, without your mom, or whether they are living without their mom. One day they are going to be without them. Like, death is a part of life. And I think people who haven't experienced this loss just get so like, what? Like, this is the thing, this happens? I'm like, yes, it happens. Like, I mean, I'm not going to lie. I thought I was invincible. I mean, everyone thinks that it won't happen to them, but it's like, it's going to happen to you. And I don't try to be like a Debbie Downer, but also try to be realistic. And like, I think that's very important to point out to people. Like, one day you will be without your mom, regardless if you are living or not. And exactly. I actually heard this analogy the other day. One of my friends told me, she's like, grief is like the ocean. And I kept thinking, and I was like, it kind of is. And it's weird. I went to like a theme park that weekend. I was like, oh my gosh, grief is like a roller coaster. And I know it sounds cliche, but like, oh, some days are up, some days are down, some days you're flipped upside down. Like, roller coasters go underwater. some days you're like floating on the water. Some days you're under the water. I'm like, oh my gosh. I don't know. Maybe I'm just weird and like roller coasters, but
it's that up and down, up and down. And that's what I recently had a good close client of mine as well as friend. She just lost her stepmom to breast cancer, and they were really close, like as of last week. And was going, just kind of reached out to her and just like, ask me questions. Like, let me, even about hospice and, what it looks like at the end. Like, trust me, like, ask me. I want to be an open book for you because, when I went through it, I didn't have some, like, you're like, what is going on? What is all this, and there's a lot of comfort in, going through it with somebody else. It's also very sad, of course, but just trying to, I'm an open book with it because grief is crazy and you just don't understand how it goes up and down and how you have good days and also the triggers. Like I'm trying to explain to people triggers, like, the day of my mom's death, that's a tough day. Mother's Day really sucks. I never really knew how much Mother's Day would suck. I just kind of shut down for Mother's Day. I'm not going to lie. I can't go to church. I can't, it's a really, really tough day for me, which is funny because I just really never, you honored your mom on Mother's Day, but you didn't really care that much of it. It's like a Hallmark holiday. Now you're just like, man, this holiday sucks.
Yeah. I pretty much just burned myself and anything.
And your birthday, my birthday, because you don't have that person calling you anymore, being like, here's your birth story, and that joy.
I'm not glad you struggle with that, but I'm glad I'm not the only one because my birthday is like harder for me sometimes than my mom's birthday. And people are like, you're crazy. I'm like, all right, well, whatever. I guess I'm crazy then.
No, but it's because that was like, I didn't really realize it really until my mom was gone, but for my kids, that's a huge celebration for me because that's when I had my babies, and it's the same. It's like, gosh, that's something that's fun to celebrate with your mom who had you and birthed you and brought you into this world. And then Christmas, of course, all the holidays, those are always tough, and so it's explaining to my friend, I was just like, there's times that I kind of disappear. Like I will kind of become a homebody and not do things, not as active on, in the group and stuff like that. And it's just because it's my way of coping with these tough times. And then I'll get back kind of like nothing happened. And it's like, I just had to get over it. I had to kind of mourn and then, okay, now I'm back, but there's those triggers and they just come up and gosh, they'll probably always be there, I assume. I don't, but maybe it'll get easier as the years go by. But it's just tough, and there's no really way to explain it to people until they've gone through it, and that's okay. Like I was in the dark for a long time, and now I've kind of opened to the light of the sorrow of grief, and it's a whole new world, and it gives you a new perspective on seeing the world through different eyes and how much of the world is grieving and just getting through day to day. And it really gives you lots of empathy for other people in a major way.
I love how you said that. I think as we go through our own separate, grief process and we start to grow. Obviously, it's very important, one, to point out that grief does not end. That's just not a thing.
Yeah.
But it's also important to realize, I love you're saying, you have more empathy. Like, when my mom first died, I was not empathetic, not gonna lie. Granted, yeah. I think it was because I was the first person of my immediate friend group or whatever, had been through that loss. I'm like, don't tell me you understand if you lost your great uncle because you don't understand. Exactly. So obviously now I'm a lot more empathetic, but I love how you mentioned that because it really just goes to show, especially in the beginning stages of grief, the importance of having people around you that can truly understand your loss. Like, not just say, I understand. Like, obviously, everybody's loss story with their mom is different, but like a woman who's lost her mom is a woman who's lost her mom. Like, I don't care how else you look at it. And I didn't have that until, I got to college. And like, once I got to college and realized that there's so many people like me, I was like, oh my word, this was a night and day difference. But like, when you don't have that at first, you realize how hard it is. And like, when you finally find that, oh my gosh, it's so riveting. And you realize how helpful,
it's just comforting,
and how healing it is. And even if like you need help, and like, especially if like you see other women who have experienced your loss and they're doing well, and like getting help from them and seeing that like, hey, they're doing well, I can do well too. Let me, obviously grief, is very individual, but like, hey, what did you do to be in this place? Like, maybe I should try what you did. Like, maybe I can get some pointers just by talking. Like, it's just crazy. And I find it more comforting to talk and to get help from, other women who've lost their moms, just because like, they're not going to judge you. They're not going to say that, what you're feeling. Like, they're literally not going to be like, I understand. Not saying that those people who do say that are condescending, but it goes unsaid. They don't need to say that they understand for you to feel like they understand. And I cannot stress the importance of that enough. It's just like finding.
Oh, it's just huge. Like, that's what I always encourage people. I'm like, go on that motherless daughter site to start.
I mean, if it's overwhelming for you, there's plenty of, I think, because there's also like 10 trillion groups or something like that. I'm like, and that's kind of sort of why I started this podcast. Like, if podcasts are more of your thing, if blogs are more of your thing, like whatever, there's plenty of resources out there for you to find a community with other women who have been through your loss. So like, whatever it is that is your thing, like, go find it. It's out there.
Yeah. And you feel like you have kind of this like unspoken bond with people. Like, I have a good bit of friends now that have lost their mothers, and some that we've come together with because of that. Like, there's another franchise for FIT4MOM in Chattanooga, and that's kind of how we came together. She shared her story on one of our like co-FIT4MOM pages about losing her mom, and she's a year ahead of me in her loss. And I like almost immediately reached out to her, and I was like, hey, I mean, this is a weird thing, but I lost my mom too. And like, we have this like bond that you can't explain because of that, like, we may be like completely polar opposite of people, but because we both lost our moms, and she lost hers when I think she's just recently had a baby, so she had a baby without her mom, and walking through that with her and kind of hearing her talk about that. And we just have this, we can almost just like look at each other and just know, I get it. I get that sorrow. I get that, and without even saying anything. And I have another friend who, she's kind of a mentor of mine, and she lost her mom about the same age as I, but she's 20 years fast forward, not quite 20 years, but she is fast forward a bit. Her children were young, like mine were when she lost her mom, and now her children are graduating high school or college, and so she's walked it, and it's just going through it with her, her talking about it, and she's made more progress than even I have in navigating her grief, and just kind of hearing some of her stories of how she's conquered and still been an amazing mom and still been a successful businesswoman, and hearing that, hey, I can do that. I see you did that. I can do that too. And it does. It's just that strange solace that you get with that like-mindedness that you have. And and that sorrow that you shared.
Yeah, it's a small world. That's for sure. And it's so
It
nice,
is.
like when you find, another woman who can relate to your loss, that you literally don't have to feel like you have to talk about it, or you have to say everything that comes to your mind. Like you don't have to say, like you don't have to hear them say, I understand, because you know that they understand. And it's like, it's hard to
Yeah,
describe, but there's
exactly.
literally just something about it. Like it doesn't matter if you've ever met them. It doesn't matter if you like know them personally, but just knowing and just conversing with them just about everyday life or whatever, knowing that like, oh my gosh, it's so hard. Like I feel like grief and just in general, like a lot of people think that like, is this normal? Is this like a thing? But knowing and just conversing with these other women and realizing that this is a thing. Like it's okay if I'm
Mm-hmm.
feeling X amount of ways, but if you would just ask a random person who has never lost anything in their life or has never grieved anything, they'd probably be like, I don't know what to tell you. And I'm like, dude,
Yeah.
that's not helpful. Like I appreciate it, but I mean, that just goes to show like when you need help, that might not be the best person to turn to. Just saying, but that's just my 2 cents. So,
Exactly. I know. I remember like kind of my first stages of grief, and you cry a lot at first, of course. And I just remember a person was um, one of I was with two other women, and one of them was like, I just feel like I need to pray for you and just lift you up. And I was like, thank you, I appreciate that. Well, of course, while she was praying, I started crying. And the other girl that was there was just like, oh, she's crying again. And you're just like, what? Like, of course I am. Like, this is tough. Like, and that's like those few situations where those things just etch into your memory. And you're just like, what a terrible way to respond to somebody crying about their mother. Like that's just not okay. And I think that's why I've also become quite vocal about my grief with others, because I feel like so many people just don't get it. And so let me share a bit of my depth of sorrow that I have because of these things that I don't have anymore because my mom's gone. And that though, yeah, I don't cry about them as much anymore, but they're still very hurtful. But also talking about it is honoring, and it's good for me, and it's healing in a major way. And those are those things that, I wish that, I think that's why another one of my missions are just to like blow the cap off of what grief is with other people and talk about it, because I'm like, people need to know, like, one, it's hurtful when you respond that way. And two, like, it is tough, and that's okay for it to be tough, and it will always be tough. Um, but you just kind of, one day they'll deal with it, and then they will understand. Um, and they're lucky that they don't yet, but don't be mean to us that are grieving.
yeah, you're so right. I mean, sometimes I don't even know what to say when I meet these people. And I wish our world wasn't so uncomfortable talking about grief and death, because when you are born, that is the start of how long like it will be until you die. And that's, like I said, I'm not a negative Nancy, but like death is a part of life. And I don't think people realize that when they're living, which,
I know.
I mean, to each their own, but like, it's just sad and it breaks my heart how uncomfortable the world is talking about death. And I'm like, no, like
I know.
that's why when people experience death, it rocks their world, because they act like it can never happen and it
Right.
doesn't exist. And I'm like, and I don't know. And I guess I was kind of sort of like that. I mean, maybe they just don't think about it, but like, it's just so important to
Yeah.
talk about when you're living. I mean, like, I like don't think it's ever too young. I'm like, okay, I have a will. Like, I'm not thinking I'm gonna die
Yeah.
today,
Oh
but
yeah.
like in all actuality, like if you have assets, get a will. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it sounds so
Yes.
silly, but like
You,
unless you want to die intestate or intestate or whatever, I don't even know what the correct verbiage is, but like unless you want your assets to go to the state, like Like, I don't want that because the state's not going to do what I want them to be done with it. So, yeah, I'm getting on a tangent now. But,
Right.
I mean, yeah, it's just important. So, is there anything that, like, you want to leave with the listeners that just is on your heart? Or it can be anything about anything. It doesn't really matter.
The one thing I think that with just navigation of grief, as well as just working with women, is we don't hear a lot that we have purpose and we are enough, and that even if you have this depth of grief that takes you where you feel like you can't put one foot in front of the other, you can, and believe in yourself that you can. And if you can't do it on your own, go ask for help for somebody to take those steps with you and hold your hand, because you are not alone in it. And don't hide away in your grief. Don't keep it hidden within your heart and inside. Let it out, because you know what? The world does need to know, and you matter enough that there will be somebody to walk alongside you with it. And don't believe that lie that you're not worth it.
Okay, I'm just going to sit, sorry, I paused for a minute. I was like, I'm just going to sit here and just let that sink in, let that resonate. I love that. You completely just took the words out of my mouth, and I'm glad that you were able to say them. So thank you so, so much. I love getting this.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Anytime I get to talk about
it feels good. I mean, I think it feels good. Maybe I'm just weird.
I do. Yeah, it is. It always does, because like I've kind of talked about, it's a way that I can honor my mom, and that is healing, and that is powerful, because she was great. And so why hide it away? Let's still talk about her, because yeah, she might not be living, but she's living inside of me, and I can keep that alive.
Exactly. You keep your mom alive by sharing her story and by sharing your story, period.
Yeah.
Hey friend, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Before you go, I have 3 favors to ask you. First, I wanted to let you know that I host a group for women where we share our day-to-day stories, challenges, and victories. If you want to come along for the ride, head to Facebook and search for Life After Losing Mom Community. Second, if you don't mind leaving me a review and telling me how I've helped you in your grief journey, I would greatly appreciate it. Finally, head to katbonner.com/podcast to access previous episodes and subscribe for episodes in the future.
This has been an OutsourceYourPodcast.com production.